Welcome to our school board interviews. I am Reverend Corinne Mack, President of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP. These interviews were done on an individual basis to allow you to hear directly from each candidate. Please take the time to listen carefully. But before I go any further, I must thank two phenomenal women, Ms. Annette Albright, who is our educational chairperson, and Mrs. Terrell Nichols, who is our political action chairperson. These women have done so much work to ensure that we elevate not only our children in the educational system, but this process. Please take the time to listen to every interview and make a decision as to who best serves you, your children, and your family. It's so important that we are involved in this process. This branch, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg branch, led the charge in the lawsuit against the state legislators for educational inequity, violation of the Landrill Act. That lawsuit will directly change the lives for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and children at risk. Educational equity is imperative. We're talking about our children and their futures. And so the work that we do on a daily basis is to ensure that we have a just system. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you enjoy every interview. God bless you.
I'm Carol Sawyer, and I serve as the District 4 representative on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, and I'm running for a second term, and I ask for your support. When I was a kid, I went to school board meetings with my mom. Back then, my school district charged textbook rental fees. My mom fought those fees because she saw families struggling to pay and the shame they felt when they couldn't. I learned from my mom the power of advocacy and the importance of equity. My election to the school board in 2017 seems like a lifetime ago. In those pre-COVID days, I successfully championed a new equity policy. I spent months drafting that policy in collaboration with education advocates, the BPC Education Committee, and my colleagues on the board. I also worked to reestablish a community equity committee. Establishing that committee was difficult. Several board members opposed its creation, but I persisted because I was committed to having community members engaging with our board on our equity work. And the board has already made changes to our policy because of that committee's work. As a kid, I learned that policy had the power to change lives, and now as policy committee chair, I'm working with my colleagues to ensure that CMS reflects the values of our community and has positioned itself to educate all children in our community. This is important work, and it'll make our system stronger, more accountable, and more equitable. My daughter graduated from East Meck High School, and I've lived in Charlotte for over 20 years now. I have been a steadfast defender of books that I think our students need access to and that reflect the diversity of our community and our education is power, and our students need access to all kinds of books written by all kinds of authors. I spent the last year, as these books have been challenged by people have come to the board to challenge these books, and I've had a great time reading them. I think I'm the only board member that actually has delved back into young adult fiction to read all the books that are being challenged. At this point, the board has really good policy to protect books. There is a process. A parent can opt their student out of a reading assignment, but there isn't, it takes a lot of work to have a book withdrawn. So I think our policy is good, but I am still very concerned that we need others to join me in standing up to the pressure to, if not ban books, to make, I think we're at a real danger point of subtle censorship. where a school may choose this book instead of that book because they don't want the hassle of being attacked. And that is the real danger we face, is that that books in CMS won't be banned outright, but there'll be subtle decisions in response to intense pressure to remove books. We had a public speaker the other day who said that we shouldn't have books that had sexual content, drug use, suicide, or violence. And I'm married to a historian. My husband, Tom Hanchett, is a historian of Charlotte, and I've learned a lot of history from him. And my background is in research science. I believe that science textbooks should be, and science curriculum should be developed by scientists, and historians should develop the texts that go with history. That's a pretty easy one for me. I don't want parents or community members who are not subject matter experts or educators determining the curriculum. I don't at this point know exactly the numbers of drivers or routes that we're having trouble filling. I think we were doing pretty well at the beginning of the year, and we have a steady training program to bring new bus drivers into the pipeline and help them get their commercial driver's licenses. Clearly, we have raised our pay for bus drivers. I would like to be able to raise it more. As you probably know, CMS doesn't set the pay scales. Those are mostly set by the state, by our state funding and our county funding. With some of the federal COVID relief dollars, we've been able to offer bonuses, hiring and retention bonuses for our staff, including bus drivers. But the challenge is that money goes away in 2024. So we can't raise salaries using that money, because in 2024 people would face salary cuts, and that's not fair. I think it's a both and. I think there are facilities that have reached the end of their natural lifespan and need to be replaced, and there are some facilities that we can upgrade and upfit. As we are currently in the process of reviewing our capital needs. We're actually inviting the public to comment on our capital needs assessment document, which projects potential projects for a 2023 bond referendum. One of the challenges is with some of our older buildings is that they're not really upfittable. I mean, by the time you replace roofs and HVAC and you realize that they don't have the capacity to handle the electrical needs of the devices that we use now, and they don't have the air quality that our students and staff deserve because they're just old and decrepit. Right now we have a lot of HVAC units that are so old we're having to get parts handmade to repair them. So that's not a sustainable operation. So we have requested more maintenance money for years, and that's actually a county responsibility, but have not been able to keep up with the maintenance needs because we haven't had the funding. And then, you know, if we're not able to keep up with all the maintenance, then we need to replace those buildings sooner because we can't keep them up. But our students deserve modern facilities with good air quality, the right technology, the right light, natural Right now, every student in CMS has access to free breakfast. So that I think is in good shape. For schools that are in areas where there is what's called community eligibility, many of the schools in my district, District 4, are in areas of poverty, so that students don't have to apply for free or reduced lunch. It's automatically granted to the entire school community. So those schools are fine. The hard part is for the schools that are not eligible in that community eligibility for lunch. And in those schools, we need to get folks to fill out the free and reduced lunch forms. And that's a big effort. We have been lobbying our state as well as our federal government to restore the free lunch waiver. During COVID, everyone was eligible for free lunch, and that went away. Um, the state has the money to cover lunches throughout the state, but they have opted not to do that. And the federal government could change that requirement and fund free lunches throughout the nation. Um, that would be the best solution as far as I'm concerned. But in the meantime, for families that do not have lunch access, I mean, without filling out the form, we try and get them to help to fill out the forms. And no child is denied a lunch if they can't cover the payment. That is just not. We make sure our food and nutrition staff care about children, and they make sure that no child goes hungry. The best safety measure we could implement is to make sure that every child in every school has a trusted adult. And whether that's their teacher, the principal, the custodian, or one of the cafeteria staff, that every child has a trusted connection to an adult in the school who sees them, values them, and has a relationship. I think that is the way to build a safe school culture. There are gaps in academic outcomes for our students across the district. We are focusing our resources on those students who need the most supports to catch up. And one of the things that has changed in perspective is that our staff are making sure that every child in every school is receiving grade level instruction. And we need to do that so that we maintain high expectations for all students across the district. So we're providing the grade level instruction and then providing the scaffolding that that child might need to get to that grade level instruction. The extra supports, the small groups, the tutoring, whatever it takes to get them to that grade level. The board is monitoring our progress toward our academic goals at every meeting going forward. And we are asking the superintendent at those meetings what strategies are working to increase student performance. What strategies do they need to change or tweak because they're not being as successful as they'd hoped? But we are looking at that at every single meeting now, and holding staff accountable for reaching those goals, and holding ourselves as a board accountable to monitor and to support and make sure we get there. You know, I don't like to look at District 4 as a problem. District 4 is an amazing group of schools that has probably the most racial and ethnic and linguistic diversity of any other district in CMS. Our schools serve children who speak Nepali and Russian and Spanish and Arabic and every imaginable. We have a couple hundred languages spoken in District 4. And that is an asset. Now, sometimes, because those students are new to the school, their test scores don't look so good. Because in North Carolina, a student is obligated to take tests even if they don't speak English. That's a state thing, that's not a CMS thing, and it's very unfortunate. That said, we have academic performance needs that we need to focus on, and we are focusing on those needs. But I think we need to use that performance data to inform our strategies and to guide what supports we add to students in our schools, and not use that data as a weapon to shame and blame educators. I want to be data informed so that we can support our students with the needs that they have. But so I think that is what we need to do on the East Side. I'm very excited about some new initiatives that are coming to support our English language learners, our newcomers, that's being developed.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Sneed, and I'm a candidate for the Board of Education, District 4. And I will start today and begin every time the same way that I do when I address the Board of Education. We are in a state of emergency here in Charlotte, and the number one emergent issue that people are not paying attention to is the unacceptable performance of CMS students, particularly those are of color. The number of low-performing schools has increased from 42 to 50, and 84% of Black third graders are not proficient in reading. It is time for a fresh perspective from a proven and trusted leader connected to the community it serves. I am an employment attorney, former trial attorney for Child Protective Services. I serve on the CMS Bond Oversight Committee. I'm a CMS volunteer, a PTA member, a Girl Scout leader. I'm the immediate past chair of the Black Political Caucus, but the most important role that I have is that I am a CMS parent. I'm a parent of a son who was in this target grade that we're talking about. He just finished third grade this past year. I had a daughter that was in a low performing school as well. I want something different and extraordinary for all of our students. And that has to be addressed through a laser focus on student outcomes, support for our teachers and staff, access to mental health care for our students and their families, collaboration with other governmental entities, community stakeholders, organizations, and the corporate community and parents. It is time, in order for us to make a difference, it is time for new leadership that is trusted by the community. Again, I'm Stephanie Sneed, District 4. I believe that students should be exposed to diverse, culturally relevant, inclusive materials, and that are age appropriate and grade appropriate, that will further advancement of good student outcomes. I think that we should be presenting historically accurate, diverse, inclusive materials to our students that is grade appropriate, age appropriate, and that is for the purpose that will advance our students in their studies. Specifically in terms of the drivers, I think that we have to make sure that our pool is wide and far, that we are creating a pipeline possibly for our communities to become school bus drivers. We have to make sure that we are paying them a competitive salary And the most important thing is, one, we have to make sure they're reporting to a place that they are excited about coming to work. One of the things is that, can be a deterrent is if people have lost faith in the system or the organization that they're seeking employment, people will not become engaged or not want to work for that organization. So if the community trust has been broken with an organization, such as CMS, then it will be hard to recruit people. So one of the things that is it may not be an atypical response is that we have to have new leadership at CMS in order for it to become a trusted organization in the community, so that community can have buy-in, whether that's becoming employees or volunteers for the organization. It just depends. Like an analysis has to be done on what is the best for a particular school building. It can't be across the board. I particularly sit on the CMS Bond Oversight Committee. I particularly ask those questions. Is it better for a particular school for it to be a tear down and rebuild? If so, are we doing that in a sustainable, green, and advanced materials, a forward-thinking, innovative construction materials manner, or is it better to renovate those particular school buildings? Unfortunately, it's not a particular answer that I can give across the board. Sometimes it could be a situation where it is appropriate just to essentially do retrofits or renovate a building as opposed for it to be a tear down and rebuild. One, I think we need to, there are a couple of ways that we can deal with that. One, we have to be advocates, federally as well as state, in order to have those supplements. Like that has, free breakfast and lunch for all students has ended. We need to be dedicating dollars specifically to expand those opportunities within CMS as much as possible. Does that particularly mean CMS has to be the person or the entity, I should say, that is totally responsible for offering a broad range of opportunities for all students to have free lunch and breakfast? This is something that we can look into with community partners, with our corporate community as well, to see, how can we make sure that free lunch and breakfast is available for all students, if not all, as many as possible. I think there are a couple of approaches to this. One, we have to make sure our buildings, there's funding that's attached to facilities, particularly for safety. So we have to make sure that our buildings are structurally safe. Does that mean, do we have locking mechanisms for all of the schools at the front door? Like, do we have screening capabilities for those? So that's one thing. So we have to make sure our facilities are in place. The second thing is, this is a great opportunity for us to partner with the city and other governmental entities. For example, the city has a violence disruptor program. We constantly hear from CMS, very much so, that issues or fights or students bringing weapons to school are community issues that come into the school. Well, the city has violence disruptors. Those violence disruptors should be connected with CMS, so the schools can have an advance notice, like, hey, there's an issue in the community. School, you need to be aware of it. How can we partner to diffuse these situations? The third thing is, appropriate training on recognizing where, to make sure that our appropriate staff are trained in diffusing situations with students that may erupt in violence. The second thing is to be able to recognize students that may be struggling and need mental health support, that could lead to violence in schools, right? And then the fourth aspect of it is to make sure we have staffing for the adequate number of counselors, school counselors, psychologists, mental health support for students as well. There has to be a laser focus on it. Like there has to be resources particularly dedicated to end those educational gaps in learning. That may mean that there needs to be some flexibility with curriculum. There needs to be flexibility with money. There needs to be particularly programmatic issues such as tutoring, teachers assistants assigned to more schools, more expert teachers. Like there has to be an in-depth view of that will particularly target in identifying the struggles of students that are low performing and to end those disparities and gaps. If we just, first we have to, acknowledge that they exist, and then there has to be a laser focus on how to end those gaps. That also includes communicating with teachers that are teaching the students, like what are the best methods in order to move the needle forward. One of the most important things that we can do, though, is not have a deficit view of children. We constantly kind of set the bar low and have a low expectation. If we have a low expectation of students, then they are not going to rise to the occasion. So that is one of the most important things that I think that we forget about, is to make sure that we don't have, in addition to all those other programmatic things that you can do, to make sure that we don't have a deficit view of children. The number one problem in my district is that I'm in District 4. It is now falling to the lowest performing district of all the CMS districts. 65% of the schools are rated D or F, and so they're considered low performing. So there needs to be a concentration on D4. So there needs to be specific goals attached to changing not only the educational gaps, but to moving District 4 schools, from the bottom to the top. So District 4 is a diverse district, so there has to be unique plans to address all of the students, because this is particularly a Black and Brown issue for D4. There has to be a laser focus on goals that will goals to close these gaps. That is the number one issue here, is that the number of schools that we have that are low performing is at higher rates of any other in the district. So the superintendent has to have specific goals. The board has some specific goals to close these gaps. The superintendent needs to execute those goals, and those need to be attached to, and this is the same for any of these educational gaps. His goals need to be attached to closing those gaps and the specific plans and dollars that will deal with these disparities.
Well, I hope you enjoyed those interviews. Now is the time to make the decision. I pray it was a help to you. But please remember that it's so important that you vote the entire ballot. Every position is a critical position and will, in fact, direct your family. As you go through this electoral process, think back to these interviews to make the determination on what's best for you. I hope that you enjoyed this time with us. I hope you consider becoming a member of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP, because we do the real work. We love you. We hope to see you soon. Please stay safe. God bless you all, and good night.